Hello, everyone. We're back, and I have a wonderful guest here. Somebody who is able to speak to something that I've been really curious about for the better part of 30 years. The first time I've heard about resilience. I have a wonderful psychologist, author, mother, Dr. Kate Lund. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I'm totally excited. Now let's tell us about your book.
I just had a new book come out. It's called Step Away: The
All
Keys to
right.
Resilient Parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it is a self-care manual, so to speak, for us as parents. How can we optimize our own sense of well-being within our own unique context such that we can show up the way we want to as parents, as leaders in our community, and how can we then model these ways of living and ways of being, these traits of resilience for our kids, helping them to integrate them along the way.
I love that. That's a lot. I work with kids in the schools, and I used to teach also, and it's really interesting to see what's happening with them and with parents. As a teacher, you get to interface with a lot of parents about grades and things of that nature, progress notes and things like that. And I find that a lot of parents seemingly are checked out of the process or overwhelmed by life.
Mhm. Yes.
I don't
Yes.
know if you could speak to that because it seems to be a lot of the population.
Yeah, this notion of overwhelm within the context of life is so common, particularly for us as parents. And that's one of the things that my book is designed to help with. This idea of there's no one size fits all in terms of what it means to optimize your well being. So we want to help folks to become aware of what they need within their own unique context to maximize their well-being. And once that happens, um, the sense of overwhelm tends to decrease, and it's a really important thing to address because the Surgeon General put out a report about a year ago saying that parents in the US are at a breaking point in terms of their level of stress, in terms of the amount of burnout that we're seeing across domains with parents. It goes beyond parents, but we're talking about parents here. And so that's why I believe a book like Step Away is so important, helping parents to take a close look at what they need within their own context to show up the way they want to show up, both for their kids and then in meetings related to their kids, in at school, in extracurriculars, on the sidelines of the sports games, so that they can be modulated and even in how they're approaching these things, because they're going to be things that are kind of construed as challenges, things that are
Hmm.
difficult to manage through and beyond. And so we want to help folks show up in as even a way as possible.
What are a few things you would suggest
Yeah,
um, to
yeah,
do
yeah,
that
yeah.
process? What would you suggest?
Well, yeah. So the first thing that I always teach, and it really is a universal concept, helping folks to show up in this even space, right? So we want them to have a tool, which I'll tell you about in a second, to get them to this even space, because we don't want parents to be showing up to things in an emotionally escalated way, such that when a challenge hits, they intensify to the point of shutdown, right? We want
Hmm.
to help them stay even. And a technique that I really love, because it's so easy to teach, easy to implement, is called the relaxation response. It was developed by a physician in Boston in the late 1970s. Uh, Really stuck, is so effective, and is used across domains by many people. And super simple to teach. You come up with a word or a phrase that you find soothing in some way,
Mm,
and you breathe. And I have folks practice this for 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes later in the day, to start to internalize what that more level space feels like. And with consistent practice over time, that starts to become one's baseline.
mm,
And once that happens, parents are able to show up a bit more even keeled, a bit more level. They're feeling more kind of stable, resilient in themselves.
mm-hmm,
They can teach this to their kids, they can do it, but it's a really important core construct. And then from there, it's really understanding themselves.
mm-hmm,
What do they need to feel whole, to feel optimized within their own context? So for some, it's engaging in a hobby that they haven't
mm,
done for years and years and years because they've
mm,
lost themselves in life and in parenting. For some, and I would argue for most, it's some sort of social connection or sense of community support. It's
mm,
engaging in that sort of thing. It's really being able to understand uh, who their kids are and what their kids need to thrive within their own unique context. Because sometimes there's a line there that parents don't really see. They want their kids to, or they believe their kids will flourish in the same ways that they flourish. But oftentimes that's not the case. There are
mm-hmm.
different things that are needed. So it's connecting, understanding our kids in a way that helps them flourish as well. But that's those are sort of the core foundational aspects. And also understanding our kids allows us to connect with them in a true, authentic, and human way.
This is interesting. I love this. I would tell people at the school and other, colleagues of mine in this field, in psychology and the therapeutic field, that what I've noticed over the years, um, the kids lack what you just said, connection.
Mm.
They have pseudo communities. They're
Mm-hmm.
not real communities. I'm 57.
Mm-hmm.
When I grew up, probably the same way as you grew up, in our neighborhoods and suburbs or inner city, and we actually had neighbors that we
Right.
went out, talked to, that we could go out and look across the street when you get your newspaper for your parents and wave at the Johnsons across the street, right? And the Joneses down the street, that kind of thing. Well, these kids don't have that. They don't have that sense of connection. We had somebody across the street from us named Mr. Moore. He was the
Mm.
nosy neighbor, but he kept everybody in check. He made sure nobody was breaking into your house, that kind of thing. We had a sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we were able to do things as kids together that these kids, I don't think, can relate to because it's all online, pseudo communities. And so could you speak to the lack of connection with regard to that personal human contact piece?
Yeah, it's such a great point. And it's true. Things have shifted from those cool, connected neighborhoods where you had neighbors that were outside and you could talk to them, regularly. It's just not really like that. I would argue pretty much across the board these days. And that is a missing piece. So we're losing that skill and our kids are losing that skill of connecting in real time. And when connections are only happening online, there can really be a sense of disconnect with what
Mm,
appears to be kind of a connection, but it's really a surface connection.
mm,
And then that comparison game comes online, kind of seeing these perfect images and these perfect pictures of people that we think we need to be like. And that happens for us as parents too. And
mm,
I think it's really important to find a way to foster those in real life connections so that there is that sense of authentic human experience within the context of connection. So, so vital. And helping our kids, so modeling that for our kids as
Mm-hmm.
parents is really important. But really, beyond that, it's modeling it for them within the context of how we're connecting with them,
Good.
sharing aspects of our experiences with them in developmentally appropriate ways,
Mm-hmm.
sharing the points where perhaps we've struggled, we've had a challenge, places where we've fallen down, but we've had to get back up and try something again from a different angle. And sharing moments like that from our own lives as parents with our kids in an authentic human way is vital, I believe, because it really gives kids that idea of what that human connection feels like at a
Mm-hmm.
foundational level. And it gives them the idea that it's okay to fail or not succeed the first time out of the gate. And, you know, it's actually it's expected, right? It happens to all of us. And for our kids to understand that through connection with us as their parents is a very powerful thing and a very important thing. And will set the foundation for then fostering those in real life relationships moving forward. So it starts with us and how we're connecting with our kids.
I love this. This is amazing. I remember, worked in education for a long time. And one of the things I learned ages ago was when you are trying to develop a relationship, and I'm sure it's the same way with counseling or any other kind of um, field like that, when you're dealing with other people, um, I try to be transparent. I do it with, some therapy models. I definitely do it with the kids when I'm working with kids. And my 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 little thing was, I tell the kids, hey, look, I'm not, you know how parents say I'm not perfect and all that, right? Well,
Mhm.
I would basically, tell them, hey, if I messed up, right, which I do, I'll say, hey, I messed up. And I'll do it in a way and face to face with the child so they'll understand that I'm a human being and I can make mistakes too. So it's not me just saying I'm not perfect, but I'm literally owning up to my stuff, you know, and and I find that that endears them much more to me. You're talking about wildfire. The kids will, they talked about me around the school like, oh, that's Mr. Times, that's Mr. Times, and the other teachers can't figure out, you know, man, why do they love you so much? Well, it comes down to what you're just saying, Dr. Lund. And
Mhm.
and that piece is missing, I think, in the kids' lives. Very interesting because, the parents, from what I'm seeing, they're giving their children things.
Mhm.
They're getting laptops and they're getting iPhones and Apple watches and da 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 da. And all the kids have the same stuff, but they're so disconnected. And I would love to you to speak to this piece. I think that disconnection um, breeds trauma inside of the body, inside of the system. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I don't know that I would necessarily call it trauma, but I would say that it breeds a sense of anxiety. And I've
Hmm.
seen that play out so, so much. And that can be, that can lead to traumatic underpinnings, of course, but from my lens, when we're feeling disconnected, it leaves this emptiness, this space that I find often gets filled with a sense of anxiety, a sense of worry, perhaps dread, perhaps all of the what ifs. And it can tend to get folks, kids, adults, us as parents, trapped in a cycle of negative self-talk. And
Hmm.
um the glass is not only half empty, but it doesn't have anything in it.
Mm.
And so that is a real phenomenon, something that I do see quite frequently. And it
Um,
really reinforces that importance of connection.
this emptiness that you're talking about. Now I'm thinking psychoanalysis. The glass is half empty piece. It reminds me of what I learned a long time ago about that container
Mm,
being a representation of the self.
mm.
And when you undo the container, it literally causes the self to disintegrate, to become basically fluid. What do you think about that?
Yeah, very, very possible, right? I don't, I see exactly what you're saying in terms of the idea of community, support, connection sort of gives us all, particularly kids who are in that formative developmental space, an anchor, a
Yeah,
feeling of security, like a foundation from which to build. And when that foundation isn't there as a result of a lack of connection, it's really, yeah, it's really hard to grow and develop within your context towards your potential because you're so unclear on what your context is.
that's incredible. I think this conversation needs to be had. The world needs to know
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
because we try to do the best for our kids, right?
Hmm.
I want my kids to have better than I did. I hear this all the time.
Hmm.
But what do we consider better?
That is such a great question. Yes. What do we consider better?
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think it's been redefined. When I was a kid, if I may digress, it was in the 70s. We would go to church, and for Christmas, the old people would give us a sack with an apple, an orange, and a couple of walnuts. And and if you're lucky, you got a pair of socks.
Right. Yeah.
That was it. And Merry Christmas. And I remember opening up my grandparents' gifts. They look nothing like my parents' gifts. We go over my grandmother, my dad's mother's Mama Times, and she was old. And we would go over there. She cooked wonderfully, but her
Mhm.
gifts, they consisted of a pair of brand new underwear.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. It's the necessities, right? And but you
Right.
still had that warm connection, and I'm not saying that kids don't have any of that today, right? There are
Yes.
warm family connections and such, but yes, there has been, it seems, for many a shift in the direction of the material things and that equating to connection, and that's just not the case, right? Because when we're glued to our phones or glued to our computer screens, we're not connecting in an authentic
Yeah.
human way. It's impossible. And I know that for me personally, I'm going to be embarking on a bit of an experiment come the first of the year, and that I'm going to go off social media completely. Yep.
Wonderful.
Yep. And I'm gonna do that, and I'm pretty excited about it because this year has been sort of an experiment on the other side. Like, okay, I'm gonna dive deep into like Instagram and see what happens. Really hasn't. I mean, yeah, sure. So there's some likes, there's some comments, there's some this and that, but really, at the end of the day, what does it all mean? And
Mm.
so that's actually something that I've been reflecting on a lot of late, and that's what I'm doing coming the first of the year.
You caused me to remember when we were kids, even adults, we didn't have social media. We didn't have anything like that. You picked up the telephone and you
Hmm.
called people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If you want to check on your Aunt Sally, your Uncle Joe, your grandpa, grandma, your best friend,
Hmm.
you pick the phone up.
Right.
We don't have that piece anymore, that connection piece. I don't, because the cell phone is quite different.
Mhm.
Now we text everybody.
Right. Right.
To me, it's not the same. The hearing of
Yeah.
the voice, the feeling of expression, the connectedness that you feel through the telephone,
Mhm.
in that warm sense. I don't know. I think we've lost something that we need in order to really thrive and connect. Um, Very interesting stuff. I remember talking to some wonderful young people, and they were, how do I put it? They were bullying,
Mm.
or they were contemplating bullying some
Mm.
particular child. Now, I find it very interesting that they chose to talk about this around me
Mhm.
freely. We wrapped up and done all of our work. It was the end of the year. And, it's one of those times after testing, and you just kind of have this dead time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they were just talking, and they gathered around my desk, and they were
Oh,
just shooting the breeze. And I'm just, included in hey, whatever. And
yeah.
they start just thinking out loud. And all the kids start moving closer and closer to my desk. And next thing you know, I'm surrounded by seventh graders. And they were all talking about this one thing. And I thought, I better do something about this because this doesn't sound good. And so I said, hey, have you thought about, and after I let them talk it out, and I said, hey, have you thought about what if something bad happens to that person
Mm. Yeah.
that you thought this through and you decided you're going to play this cruel trick on them? What are your thoughts about? I asked them, what are your thoughts about that? And then
Such an important question. Yeah.
they, Dr. Lund, they stopped and they looked at each other. They looked at me. They stared at me, and there was silence. So the bell rang. The next day came, and those kids came in my room and they sat down and they were quiet.
Mhm.
And one of the kids turned around to me and said, Mr. Times, you know that thing that we were talking about yesterday? I said, yes.
Mm.
They said, we're not going to do that. We changed our mind.
Excellent. Beautiful. I loved it. Just with that open-ended, what do you think might happen? And they just hadn't gone there. So thank goodness. What a powerful intervention, but such an important one to have in our back pocket to put out there. But how cool that these kids were gravitating towards you, feel safe to that degree that they're like hanging out and they're at your desk and all these things. So that came together beautifully. But yeah, I mean, so wonderful what you're providing to the kids in general sense, the safety that they'll talk openly in front of you.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. And I was, surprised and, glad that they did because, we have bad scenarios. You can only imagine, you know, uh, what happens.
Mm.
I want to switch over to something you said earlier that makes me think about the kids and adults, and that's the anxiety piece. I asked the kids in my class last spring and really last fall,
Mhm.
um, how many of you are experiencing anxiety? Guess
Mhm.
how many kids out of all the kids raise their hand? 90% of the kids
Yeah. Wow. Yeah,
each
I was gonna say
semester.
either all of them or none of them because they were
Yeah.
hiding it. But yeah, yeah, yeah. Whew.
What are your thoughts about that? Because to me, I was a bit taken aback by it.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to, well, a couple things. The connection piece is important, right? That we talked about, but also this idea that our kids are confronted with so many different inputs.
Mm.
They're coming at them from all directions, right? A lot of it's social media, the news, maybe things going on at home, maybe struggles that they're families are having, or their parents' interpretation of things that are going on in the world around them, that kind of thing. Um, but it's also related, I believe, to the expectations that are being placed on kids these
Mm,
days, either by families, parents, or just by the kids themselves, because they're normalizing kind of what they're seeing out there. Like, I have to achieve these certain things in school so that I can go to the best possible college, so that I can have
mm,
the best possible career. But really, what we're missing is helping kids to understand who they are within their own unique context,
mm,
and that there's not a one size fits all there, and that
mm.
we're not all going to flourish in the same types of high powered environments. And that's a big piece of, I think, for many, this undercurrent of anxiety is coming from things like that, or needing to excel on the sports field or in extracurriculars. Not everybody is going to win all the time. Not everybody is going to be the best artist, or as long as we're doing the best that we can
That's right.
within our own unique context, that's the most important thing. And so I think that anxiety, that current of anxiety that you're seeing in your classroom, that we're seeing in general, comes from those things, the expectations, the drive, either external or internal. And I think that's a big piece of it, in addition to the pieces we've already talked about.
I did an assessment with a client of mine in the office not long ago, and this particular client and I were talking about some things. They'd been misdiagnosed
Mm,
several times. And so I'm like, let's get to the bottom of this, you know,
mm-hmm,
before you see this other doctor. Let's drill down. So we did an assessment, took 3 hours,
mm,
and come to find out, this individual had been suffering
mm.
from anxiety symptoms their entire life.
Ooh, yeah.
And you know, they didn't realize it. Well,
Mm-hmm,
I saw some things, but you get misdiagnosed with this and that and the other. And so we wrote out a huge board. I diagram things when I'm, doing work with people,
mm-hmm,
and it seems to help. And so they're like, "Wow, I didn't know I had all that going on." I said, "Oh yeah." And and then at the end, I said, "By the way, did you notice your pressured speech?"
yeah.
They didn't, and
They
then
didn't,
they,
yeah, because it's become so much like just what they're used to, the
oh
the, the
yes,
baseline. Hmm.
absolutely,
Yeah, yeah.
totally unaware.
And so that's a huge point that you're making. It's helping folks to slow down, to take that step back, to give themselves space to really feel and experience what's actually happening with them. Because
Mm,
we're often moving so fast through the day to day, and we're caught in these spirals sometimes, that we don't have that time and space, that perspective on what we're feeling and what's holding us back. And so that's an important piece, and I talk about that in Step Away, and that
mm.
is actually helped along by the relaxation response, and kind of learning what it feels like to be in that modulated space. So it all kind of ties together.
This is so good. I gotta say, with adults and with children, sleep
Yes.
is a huge component here, I
Hmm.
think.
Oh, yes. Huge.
Would you
Huge.
like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that is so, so important, because when we're not sleeping, our brain can't downshift, where, right? We're not recovering in an
Mm-hmm.
optimal type of way.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes we're not thinking about sleep as such a vital aspect of our overall sense of well-being. So educating folks, and I do this, touch on it a little bit in Step Away, but educating folks on the importance of sleep hygiene and finding a way that allows you within your own unique context to downshift in time for good sleep. And some folks need more sleep than others, and knowing that about yourself as well and not pushing to the point of not allowing that to happen, not pushing to the point of exhaustion, no pun intended, but
Mm-hmm.
sleep is really, really primary. And helping our kids to disengage from the screens in enough time to shift into restful sleep is absolutely vital. So, educating the parents so that then the parents can help model and educate the kids around this very concept. Because if we're not sleeping, we're not recovering, and then we're certainly not performing at our optimal.
I would tell my clients and also the students also that if you're sleep deprived, you're really kind of lacking with, your brain functioning. You've handicapped yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
100%.
you're not able to process information, not effectively anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have probably some anger issues come up.
Mm-hmm.
You're definitely going to have some other dysfunctions happening internally with your body functioning, and on top of all of that, sleep, governs your mood.
Mm-hmm.
How
Yes,
can you have a even kill mood like you're talking about, Dr. Lund, if you have lack of sleep?
exactly. Huge. You can't.
This is an impossible task, seemingly, but not impossible. What are some keys that you would give someone, perhaps it's in your book, that will help someone say, a parent, a child, an adolescent, say, I can put this into practice. I don't know how yet, but let me see what would you give someone as a gift for them to be able to actually move into this well-being with their sleep. How would you say to them? What would you say to them about that?
Well, first thing, we would make sure that they had their stress response modulated in a full
Hmm.
way. So we would do that, and then we would, talk about, well, what do their current sleep patterns look like? Try to help them gain awareness of what's happening because there too, sometimes we're just going through life so fast and we just don't really think about it, and we're just kind of in the same rhythms and routines that are actually impacting our sleep in negative ways. So we would, go through sort of an assessment along those lines, and then we would do, some psychoeducation around the things, the variables that are known through research to foster good sleep and
Mm,
to foster good recovery. Disengaging from screens, not eating too close to bedtime, having your room cool and dark, all of these sort of basic kind of steps that we can take, but that are easier said than done in terms of
mm,
integrating and shifting gears on patterns that we've been in for long periods of time. But it comes down first to awareness and
mm,
helping folks understand where they are and then where they want to go in terms of
mm,
sleep, and then creating small, manageable goals to help them get there.
mm. Nice. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Excellent. Wonderful. I know it's really been great. Thank you.
I appreciate you, Dr. Lund. I really know that people will be helped and healed by this conversation. Where can they buy your book? How can they get a hold of you?
Sure, absolutely. So the book is on Amazon. The book is also very much available through my website, which is www.katelundspeaks.com. And it can be ordered in any bookstore, really.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. Dr. Lund, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for
Everyone,
having me.
yes, 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 always. And anytime we can pick this conversation up again.
Sounds
Eh,
great.
Everyone, have a good day.